What's up guys, Ngate Gaming here, back with another video. If you're like me, then you probably checked your mailbox and saw that sweet JoJo character, Dr. Ratio, in your mailbox and are now scrambling to build him with your non-existent resources. Don't worry, this video is for you. As always, if you're new to the channel, I would appreciate if you like and subscribe to the video, and as it does help with the algorithm. But with that said, let's jump into the video. So Dr. Ratio is an imaginary character who follows the path of the hunt. Unlike most of his 5-star peers, Dr. Ratio is available as a 3-star character, which is the most amazing thing Hoyoverse ever did, just by logging into Honkai Star Rail between his release date and the start of version 2.2. So you have about 2 patches to basically get him for free, as long as you've completed all the missions, all the prior missions, all the Trailblazer missions, and then obviously you just get him automatically. So as we dive into his skills, Dr. Ratio is a DPS whose damage stems from his direct and follow-up attacks. His skills may seem mediocre at first, as it basically is a slightly better version of his basic attack, but using the skill will trigger the talent's follow-up attack, thus greatly improving the total damage. Beware of the 40% fixed chance for the follow-up attack to trigger though. If you want a 100% fixed chance, the enemy target needs to suffer from at least 3 debuffs. Luckily, Dr. Ratio's ultimate ability will likely help you reach that number of applying an additional debuff in the form of Wise Man's Folly. That's a status effect that he has. Whether or not it counts as a debuff is not 100% confirmed. Obviously, when we're playing, most of the debuffs you can get from many characters such as Silver Wolf, if you have an agility character such as Pella or Kafka, usually that kind of helps. On top of that, it triggers a maximum of 2 additional follow-up attacks whenever an ally hits the target enemy. Unlike the talent's follow-up attack, beware that Dr. Ratio's technique has a base chance of reducing the enemy's speed instead of a fixed chance, which means that 100% chance will be diminished by the enemy's effective resistance stat. Although the base chance could be improved with the effect hit rate stat, it's best not to prioritize this in your Dr. Ratio build, as the technique isn't one of his most important abilities, I'd say. As long as it targets normal opponents, like not bosses, then there is a 0 to 20% effective resistance that still gives you a pretty good hit chance when you're going into battle with Dr. Ratio. So let's take a look at Dr. Ratio's trace bonus abilities first. Summation is great. You'll get a whopping 15% critical rate and 30% critical damage increase if you reach the max stacks of 6, which makes it much easier to create a proper Dr. Ratio build, especially if you don't have the best light cones and relics yet. The inference trace ability is also a helpful one to have. It allows Dr. Ratio to lower the enemy's effect resistance, making them more vulnerable to debuffs, which in turn helps Dr. Ratio deal more damage. The deduction trace ability simply improves the damage for each target debuff up to 50% extra damage, obviously having about 5 debuffs on an enemy. As for the active abilities, try to upgrade Dr. Ratio's talent trace levels first, but keep in mind that this only upgrades the damage dealt by the follow-up attack. The fixed chance to trigger the attack is still 40%, plus 20% more per debuff. So the more debuffs, the higher chance you have to obviously proc follow-up attack. Next, upgrade his ultimate end skill. There's no need to improve his basic attack, as it's obviously, for one, it's a waste of resources, and ideally you won't be using his basic attack for anything. Most of Dr. Ratio's Eidalon levels serve the same purpose, to increase his damage and especially that of his follow-up attacks. If you have enough warps left, Eidalon level 1 would make a strong improvement, as it allows Dr. Ratio to get a total bonus of 25% critical rate and 50% critical damage. Eidalon 4, on the other hand, greatly improves his energy regeneration. If you only use his skill without basic attacks, have a higher speed and make sure that follow-up attacks always trigger. You'll get a ton of extra energy from his Eidalon upgrade, and that said, Dr. Ratio's build without Eidalon levels can still give you a powerful DPS. If you're considering getting the first Eidalon level, remember that Dr. Ratio releases alongside his signature light cone, Baptism of Pure Thought, which you might want to get instead. So the best light cones for your Dr. Ratio build is the 5-star Baptism of Pure Thought. This probably doesn't require much explaining. It's the only light cone to perfectly complement his debuff related follow-up attacks, complete with massive critical damage bonus and a temporary defense lowering effect. Don't worry though, if you don't have the signature weapon, most light cones from the hunt path offer follow-up attack bonuses, critical rate boosts or critical damage boosts, which make most of them suitable for your Dr. Ratio build. Another 5-star option that stands out is the Worrisome Blissful Light Cone, as it increases both critical rates and follow-up and attack damage. On top of that, it applies an extra debuff to the enemy target. There are a multitude which I will obviously put on the screen that are really good for him in terms of 4-star options, but if you want the best alternative 5-star option, you can get the 5-star light cone from the Herta shop, or like I've explained, the Topaz light cone, which is also a really good light cone for him, as it all obviously offers that critical damage bonus on top of the follow-up attack bonus. But if you are looking to obviously summon for his light cone will always be the best suit for him, because any DPS with their light cone just builds exponentially more damage. Surprisingly easy to find suitable relics for your Dr. Ratio build. Although it's best to use sets that improve imaginary damage, damage against debuffed enemies, and follow-up attack damage, sets with attack and speed bonuses work fine for early game Dr. Ratio builds, such as the 2-piece Musketeer and Messenger sets. The best relic set for your Dr. Ratio build, however, is the 4-piece Wastelander of Banditry Desert, as it grants him an imaginary damage boost, improves all his attacks rather than just the follow-up attacks, plus the extra critical rate and critical damage. Dr. Ratio needs to attack debuffed enemies anyway, so you'll have no trouble keeping the 10% critical rate bonus active at all times. Just beware that the critical damage boost only works against imprisoned enemies who suffer the witness break effect from imaginary damage specifically. If your Dr. Ratio build doesn't require additional critical rates, you can also combine the Wastelander set with the 2-piece Ash Blazing Grand Duke set. It's best not to use the full 4-piece Ash Blazing set for my testing, however, as it requires a ton of stacks, which will be reset upon triggering another follow-up attack. So the best planner ornaments for me as well from testing set for your Dr. Ratio build is the Inert Salsato set with the critical rate and follow-up attack bonuses. It's simply perfect for his kit, and obviously keep in mind that those bonuses require a critical rate stat of at least 50%. So if you're able to build them to at least 50%, then you get that extra 15% follow-up attack damage on top of the attack and imaginary boost damage. As we look at his stats, one of the things that is quite important for your Dr. Ratio build are imaginary damage boost. Now, critical damage and critical rate are quite important as well. Ideally, you should go for critical damage on your body slot and get your critical rate from other sources. Considering that Dr. Ratio receives 12% critical rate increase from his minor traces or trace stats and 2.5% critical rate per buff from his summation trace, he typically has about 27 to 32% extra critical rate with 4 to 6 active buffs, even without the rest of his build. So if you're using Inert Salsato Planner Ornament set and manage to get some critical rate substats on your Dr. Ratio relics, you'll most likely be able to add at least another 20% critical rate, which would be enough to activate Inert Salsato full set effect. The link rope presents us with another difficult choice, I'd say, because energy regeneration or more attack power? You know, that's the question. Since Dr. Ratio is a DPS whose damage largely stems from his follow-up attack and skills, it seems a bit wasteful to dedicate an entire relic stat to energy regeneration, even if it helps him land more follow-up attacks. It's therefore better to get the energy boost from an ally, obviously looking at Dan Heng specifically. The most important subsidiary stats are either critical rates or critical damage, depending on the rest of Dr. Ratio's build. If you've chosen, obviously depending on Dr. Ratio's build, if you've chosen critical damage as your main relic stat, it's probably best to focus on critical rate as your subsidiary stat and vice versa. Extra speed and attack is always welcome, while having some extra effective hit rate would improve the technique's hit chance. So as we look at obviously the final kind of bits of Dr. Ratio, finding the best team compositions for Dr. Ratio is very important. To trigger his follow-up attacks, he needs his allies to implant debuffs on his opponent. Remember, the opponent needs to suffer from at least 3 debuffs to give the follow-up attack a 100% fixed chance. But they'll need to suffer from at least 5 debuffs to trigger the full bonus from the deduction trace ability. 1 debuff support may not even be enough for your Dr. Ratio team. Another thing to keep in mind is the ultimate's uptime. The sooner Dr. Ratio can cast it, the better, so consider teaming him up with an energy boosting support, obviously such as Dan Heng or Hua Hua. Since Dr. Ratio himself is a skill point negative character, he should never use his basic attack. It's best if the support is able to generate a lot of skill points for him. And finally, any support who can improve follow-up attack damage or weaken the enemy's resistance to follow-up attacks would be a great addition to Dr. Ratio's team. A good set team would be Silver Wolf, Luocha, Pella, and then obviously Dr. Ratio. One other amazing team to have a mix of both buffing and debuffing is again Silver Wolf, who seems to be one of the major characters to obviously give Dr. Ratio a good team. So Silver Wolf, Luocha, Bronya, and Dr. Ratio, because now you have a good mix of buffing, debuffing, healing, and obviously DPS. If you want to go full on obviously debuff, you could go Dr. Ratio, Silver Wolf, Kafka, and then probably even someone like Sampo, and then obviously and then that's about 3-4 people. That's obviously just complete full-on DPS. But if you're going for a more free-to-play build, I'd say go for Pella, Dr. Ratio, and then obviously you need some sort of healing, so you can go Natasha, and then obviously a shielder you could go March 7th, because I don't know if the freeze is counted as a debuff, but that would be an ideal sort of free to play. And then obviously you could round off March 7th with Sampo, because obviously his DOT would count as a debuff, as Nihility characters are more debuff characters. You could also switch out any of these characters and add in a Welt, because Welt is also one of the best characters in terms of debuffing, because obviously they're slow. But yeah, and that's pretty much it. So the final part is not should you get him. Now it becomes, should you roll for his Eidalons? No, I don't think you should. Obviously, if you have enough money, go ahead. You know, that's you being a whale, and everybody is okay with you being a whale. But there are more characters coming out in the game that are going to be game changing and game breaking. For example, we're going to be having obviously Arlan, who's coming out in probably between 2.0 and 2.2, and that's one of the major things I'm saving up for on one of my accounts. We're having obviously what's her name, Black Swan, coming out in the next patch, and then obviously we have also the buffer who's like Bronya, I think her name is Hanabi or Sparkle, who's coming out in the next patch. So I know it's really hard over the fact that now you've gotten the character, you've probably been saving for 2 patches, and you're like, okay, maybe I could actually get his light cone. Now realistically, yes, because his light cone does offer a lot of utility. I think getting a DPS character and their light cone is more beneficial than getting a healer or a buffer and their light cone. The reason why I say this is because most DPS characters, even though they're elation characters, gain more from using their light cone than using free-to-play light cones. Whereas if you have a healer, you can literally pop in any single light cone, 4-star light cone, and they'll still work, because you know what, their job is healing. The only support character I'd say who really needs their light cone, or I wouldn't say really needs their light cone, but really benefits and gives you the full advantage from their light cone, is probably Bronya. And that's because Bronya's light cone gives an extra skill point, energy regeneration, and an extra 50% to even close to even I think 60% extra damage boost at Super Imposition 5. And you know, it's free, and you can get it for free as well, as long as you farm for weeks and stuff. But that's my opinion on Dr. Ratio. He's an amazing character, unlike Genshin Impact's Aloy. Obviously, I know that's something that's been obviously hit about, but I think that Dr. Ratio is an amazing character. I think everyone's going to enjoy him. The fact that he's free, it makes it even better, because now he puts people in a position where they can actually save up for the next, obviously, patch. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Obviously, if you guys liked the video, hit that like and subscribe. I do appreciate the support I'm getting from the subscribers and the videos that I'm making. And I love you all. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next one.